Hello, my name is Ann Purvis. I'm one of the leaders of the Toronto Field Naturalist Juniors program. We gather every Wednesday at 4:30 for 1 hour. We share photos of nature adventures we've been on that week. We also do crafts, experiments, and other activities. Anyone who would like to join is still welcome, and you could contact the Toronto Field Naturalists at tfn.org. Alexia and Sienna sent in these beautiful finished journal entries on sumac. I believe Sienna used pencil crayon and Alexia used marker. A gorgeous reproduction of the color. Please everyone work on your drawings at home and finish and add to your entries. Bryn, Sonia, and Kieran attended a Pollinate TO shrub planting event at the Church of the Resurrection, my own church, on Saturday. Wow, did it ever look great afterwards. This is a picture of Vanessa and Kieran planting snowberry and purple flowering raspberry. It was just a wonderful opportunity. We had to transform our garden into a garden that is very friendly to pollinators. So here's a picture of Bryn, who found earthworms as she was digging on Saturday. So grateful for these creatures that eat leaf litter and turn it back into soil. And I would like to challenge Bryn to find out what earthworms do in the winter when the ground is frozen. Bryn also found extremely cool oak gall, which we didn't photograph, so I ripped this one off the internet. But I challenged the group if they remembered what creatures make oak galls on leaves, and we remembered that cinnamon wasps are the group of insects that make these kind of galls. So these galls are going to fall off the leaf. They're going to fall into the soil, and the little larva is going to exit out of these galls, burrow into the soil, and live there until it pupates. And it can be 2 years in the soil. This is also a picture of Sonia, who joined us on Saturday. We lined the walkways of part of our garden with logs, and Sonia recognized cedar and took some of the cedar bark and turned it into a necklace, which I was wearing yesterday at the group. Jenny, Abby, and Amelia sent in this photo of these young trees. This is a great time of year to look more closely at trees when the leaf litter is gone. I was quite mystified how these trees could have ended up with their roots out of the ground like this. I asked the group if anyone had any ideas. I don't think we did have any suggestions. I didn't know, so I asked a senior naturalist at the Toronto Field Naturalists, Dr. Eckenwalder. He's a tree specialist from the University of Toronto. He said tree seeds often sprout on top of stumps because stumps are so moist. Probably that is what happened here, and they sent roots out over the stump searching for the ground. Then the stump decayed underneath the roots and left the roots suspended up in the air like this. They also sent in these photos of 2 trees with the bark removed. I couldn't imagine what mammal could remove such big and deep patches of bark in southern Ontario. This might have been woodpecker damage. It's just interesting that none of the wood is removed. I asked Dr. Eckenwalder again, and he said bear often do this in northern Ontario, but he didn't have any other suggestions for around here. I asked the group if they could see how many different insect tracks they could see on the picture on the right. Right away we recognized these round dark holes, and these could be exit holes from either the ichneumon wasp, which we looked at the other week, or the horntail wasp, which it lays its eggs on. And I think several people noticed these bark beetle engravings, these kind of windy trails here. And then there's also these very straight trails, and I don't know what causes them, and I wasn't able to find out, but I'm on a search to figure it out. Karina and Sebastian Ephraim sent in these photos, and I asked the group if anybody could guess what these are. And we have seen a lot of leaf galls this fall. Different people have sent in pictures of them. These are actually branch and trunk galls. So they're caused by a bacteria that lives in the soil, and it can enter the tree even when it's very young by damage to a root or a stem. it inserts its DNA into a tree cell and causes it to act like a cancer cell. It starts to proliferate. The gall gets bigger as the tree grows, and it can be a problem if it grows all around the tree and girdles it and prevents the tree from actually sending water up to the leaves or sugars down to the roots. So these photos were sent in by Frank, and thank you so much, Frank. This is your first time submitting. We are so grateful for the city leaving trees on the ground. So many creatures use trees and tree cavities for shelter. Insects use them for food. And of course they refurbish the soil when they break down. Frank mentioned that he had taken this picture with the squirrel on the left also. So we noticed the squirrel here. And in the middle, we have grapes. So these are wild grapes, and we are very fortunate in Ontario that in this part of Ontario, which is surrounded by the Great Lakes, we have a very mild climate in a sense, and is so good for fruit, and it's very good for grape. We have a lot of wild grape. You can actually gather wild grapes and make jelly or make juice. The Concord grape that we use that Welch's uses to make frozen grape juice it came from this grape, and the roots of this grape were also used at one time when France suffered a terrible and destructive fungus of its grapes that it grows to make wine. And the French grapes were put on the roots of the North American wild grape, and that actually saved the French wine grapes. So this is a bush called winged euonymus, and besides being very beautiful and having beautiful fruit, it has an interesting stem where I don't know if Sebastian noticed this or not, but where it kind of has little wings on the stems. This is actually a garden version of winged euonymus. We do have two native ones that grow in the forest. This one is not so welcome in our forests because it does tend to crowd out natives. So I know over at High Park they're trying to remove it. It's growing in quite a bit of the forest over there. So Marina, Sonia, and Mila sent in these photos of birds. Thank you so much, Marina. It makes me feel like I was right there on that hike with you. This is an American goldfinch in its fall plumage. The male and the female look the same, and we don't actually know whether this is male or female. But here on the right is an American goldfinch in its summer plumage, and I challenged the group if they could see all the changes. And they correctly identified the black head is gone, most of the yellow color except on the throat is gone. It still retains the white wing bars. And the color of the beak is different, which is fascinating. It has a black beak. And then I also challenged the group if they could identify what weed the American goldfinch is feeding on. And I don't know who it was. Someone shouted out goldenrod. And yes, sir, it was goldenrod. So that was great. This is golden-crowned kinglet. Here it is taking off in flight. Bird flight is one of my favorite things in nature. This little bird is probably on its way to the States for the winter. They can overwinter in Maine where it's snowy, but I don't think we have them here. They eat insect eggs and spiders in the winter time. And I think they clump together under snow for warmth in the winter. So I challenged the group if anybody recognized this weed that this bird is feeding on. And Sonia made an excellent guess. She guessed that it was mullein, which we had talked about the other week as having a tall spike with yellow flowers in the summertime. And this plant also has a tall spike with yellow flowers. This is actually, though, evening primrose. So it makes a beautiful addition to a winter flower bouquet, a dried flower bouquet. It's just that we can see birds eat the seeds, so much better to wait until late winter to collect these, or to go out in the country where they're very common, and you can take one or two without causing any problems. So this bird is the pine siskin, and the yellow on its wing, Marina mentioned to me in the email when she sent these in, this is very distinctive of the pine siskin. And I was also fascinated that they noticed the American goldfinch and the pine siskin in the same area because they do form joint flocks in the wintertime. So this is a feather sent in by Pamela and Amara, and I wasn't able to actually identify this feather. It's definitely a bird of prey feather. It's very large. The only thing I can say about it for sure is that it's a flight feather. So all birds have 10 flight feathers attached to the fingers, their fused fingers at the end of the wing, which they use for controlling direction of flight. And I know it's a flight feather because it's not symmetrical. So one side is thinner and the other side is thicker. It's also fascinating that when a feather gets a break like this in it, it's very easy for birds to repair that. It's like these little barbs that make up the actual blade of the feather are like Velcro. When you put them together, they just put them together with their beak and run their beak along it, and they snap together again. So it's a really brilliant design. Of the feather has a brilliant design. So there were 2 praying mantis pictures that Jenny, Abby, and Amelia sent in, and I blew up this body part here and challenged the group if they recognized what it was, and people did. This is the front foreleg, which the praying mantis uses to capture prey. So it squishes the prey between those 2 parts of the leg. And then I challenged people if they recognized this part of this body part. So it's a little bit unusual angle on it, but we can see that this is the wing, and it has the veins that it looks like a leaf actually by both the vein pattern and the color. And then underneath is the abdomen. So if this is a female, she's laid her eggs, so her life will probably end soon, and it could also be a male. So I challenged the group what they would call this bug if they ran into it and were the first scientists that had to give it a name. And unfortunately, I put the name on the bottom by accident, so kind of gave it away. But it's called the leaf-footed bug, and that's because it has this swollen thigh right here. So they hang out on catalpa trees, and I challenged the group to see if anyone could find a catalpa tree this week. So catalpa is, you'll notice it has a big heart-shaped leaf, and it's covered with long skinny beams at this time of year. So this magnificent creature wandered into the yard of Sandra, Alexi, and Sienna when they were in Dundas on the weekend. And I was quite fascinated. Sandra researched and found out that this is a male. So this is a buck, and we can tell that because only the buck has the antlers. When we studied sumac and did our journal entry on sumac, we used staghorn sumac, and staghorn sumac has furry stems. The antlers of this buck which is also called a stag, has furry antlers too at this time of year, and they often rub them on young trees in order to get rid of the fur before the mating season. So that the sumac was named after the stag. It was called staghorn sumac because it has the furry surface, like the surface of the stag's antlers. So this is actually one den sent in by Pamela and Amara. We thought maybe it was 2 dens, but this is just a close-up, Amara clarified. And it's hard to say. The only distinction between a coyote and a fox den is the size. To me, this looks a bit more like a fox-sized den, judging by the length of Amara's calf there. Often in front of a coyote den, you'll see the remains of some of the food that they've hunted, and they would have, there might be the feathers of a ruffed grouse or something like that. I've seen fish bones in front of a fox's den before. So finally, I was challenged to try working with walnuts by Alexi. Alexi had brought in a walnut twice in a row. And so I found a little video that explained about how to take the husks off the walnuts And so here they are, and you boil them, and I boiled them down to this black liquid over here. And then I got a white, pure white pillowcase and a pure white 100% cotton t-shirt and a little bag. I actually washed them first so there wouldn't be anything sticky or anything on there that would resist the dye. And I put them in the dye overnight. And they turned into a beautiful gold color, which I really like. So I'm very pleased that that worked out. And then we took the nuts that were inside the walnuts and we dried them in our dehydrator at 110 degrees overnight for about 10 hours. And I broke one open. It was just delicious. So I really, that's a fun activity to do.